And now it's time for an interesting little Friday video where we discuss the times that you decided to quit watching soaps. Now, it's an interesting thing with soaps, right? Because it brings us a lot of joy and brings us a lot of passion. But somewhat similar to football, perhaps where you started, it isn't exactly the same as it is now. And you have so many people who like watch it in the 80s or watch Coronation Street in the 80s, and honestly, it's just not the same. It's just not the same as it used to be. It's a lot more sensationalized. It's a lot more overt, a lot more social issues. A whole lot less like the show of old, but both in a good way and a bad way. It's always interesting to look at the past and judge it as to where it stopped being fun. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about EastEnders, Coronation Street, Hollyoaks, and a small smidge of Emmerdale, because those are the soaps that I watch. I guess I could talk about Neighbours briefly, but ultimately I never really was that much of a fan of the show before it was cancelled. So yeah, it's just it's gauging when it stopped being fun for us, because ultimately, as said before, typically your favorite time in soap is when you first came in, or you watch some older stuff and that's your like barometer as to how it stands up. Like if you started watching Coronation Street by watching the Richard Hillman storyline, you're gonna like the killers, you're gonna like the abusers. And if you watched it in the last decade or so, you're probably gonna like the abusive relationships as such, because they do absolutely and have loved to really do those topics very frequently. And it's been quite a hot button topic in general for the last couple of years in soap. Or if you're in like the 80s and 90s, a bit more down to earth family drama, working class drama. Or in EastEnders in the 80s, family drama. In the 90s and 2000s, crime, gangs, Phil Mitchell, hard men. 2010s, a bit less of that, but still quite crime-centric. Pretty much until this Chris Glenshaw EastEnders era. A lot of very more family-centric issues. And yeah, no, just more and more as it goes on. And obviously my version of this is going to be much different from a lot of other people's. I have been watching soaps since 2018, where I started watching EastEnders after not watching it since I was like, I think I stopped watching it roughly around the time that Ben went to prison for killing Heather. And then at that point, obviously as a kid, I just kind of went, meh, don't really care about this anymore. I moved on to other things, and I think we started watching Waterloo Road, which, you know, also a banger, but also probably not something to watch when you're like 13 years old, because good Christ. Ooh. Love the show, but good Christ. But yeah, and yeah, I picked it back up in 2018, which was obviously the bad boy Alfie era. I don't even remember. That's mostly what I picked it up through osmosis. Keanu, slow rise. 2019, the return of Ben Mitchell in Max Bowden's form. The Gray Atkins stuff. And honestly, in retrospect, and this is how I'll go into talk about EastEnders, this was the time I started to fade away with EastEnders, right? Because it was EastEnders all the way. Started watching in 2018 around Christmas, around October 2018. I just started a retail job, and I needed something to just sink my teeth into and just indulge in, just really get to grips and try and enjoy it so heavily. And I did like Hayley Slater, which, you know, opinion that's aged like milk. And generally I enjoyed it, even if it was a bit more bleak. And now in retrospect, it's a time I do not look back fondly on because of where it's kind of gotten to since then. So I would watch this. So I would watch it pretty lovingly through 2018, through 2019. And then obviously 2020 happened. And a certain world event happened where everything got shut down. production of soaps got stopped, and just Coronation Street and Hollyoaks both got slowed down, while EastEnders genuinely ran out of episodes before they could actually start filming again. And during this 2019 period, during the heights of the Gray Atkins time era, I stopped giving a solitary shit about EastEnders because Gray Atkins is not my... It's not the one for me. I did not like the character. I didn't like how long it felt like it went on. I didn't like how much attention it had. I don't feel like it was really worth it to kill off those characters like Kush and like Tina, and Chantel. I like the idea of it, but also you turn a domestic abuse storyline into him being a serial killer. It just does a lot of injustice towards domestic abuse victims and telling the story accurate. So at this point, you also had Janine's return, and Janine was one of my favorite characters, and I'd watched a lot of her in the past previously, and she was pretty much my favorite soap character of all time. And at this point, I do generally start to teeter off because, the tail end of the Kate Oates, John Sen era, where Whitney, Ben, and Gray are all main characters, and all of those characters in my world got absolutely done to death, which definitely didn't help. Definitely didn't help things, because I was initially a Ballum stan, because I used to, and obviously I'll get into more about Coronation Street, I used to really enjoy watching gay couple relationships, because it's kind of first, at the start there's some novelty, but it's also I'm pretty openly an ally and very proud to be one, a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So it's always nice to see it, but ultimately in most soaps, unfortunately, these gay characters do end up getting killed off. So at some point I needed to just at some point I fell out of love with them, but simply because a lot of these characters, especially in EastEnders, were just ran into the ground. Ben and Callum had a really nice ascendancy, but the second they kind of try to rework the story and start saying that, oh no, Ben and Callum, it's just this really cute story about two working class lads who, despite all the pressures, have found each other. And it's first and foremost, the son of Phil Mitchell is not working class. That's all I'll say. And second, absolutely not. This is not the story you're telling here. This is getting a little bit frayed. So, yeah. And then the pandemic happened. And from that point onwards, EastEnders ran out of episodes. And as I was already I'd run out of material to watch. So I started to watch Coronation Street. I started to watch Hollyoaks. I started to indulge in other soaps, because at some point you typically watch a lot of the storylines that are out there and you clamor through and you watch a bunch of the older stuff, but ultimately now stuff starts to creep in. Now you start to watch the stuff that people kind of amazingly post on YouTube, like the David Platt stuff, like the Platt family stuff, like the Richard Hillman stuff, like Sophie Maddie, Sophie Sean, Kate and Rana. These storylines that are really kind of good to get into a version of Coronation Street. And so within 2020, really started to enjoy it. I mean, the main issue with Coronation Street in 2020, however, is the simple fact that ultimately you had to watch Leanne yelling at her. You had to watch two really ridiculous and two storylines that really should have gone on as long as they did, but because they had to shorten the amount of, they did 3 episodes a week as opposed to 6, so they basically just delayed it completely. So you had to watch the agonizing but still really good Jeff and Yasmin storyline while seeing Leanne lose baby Oliver in a horrendously tragic storyline, but mostly just because Leanne wouldn't shut the fuck up and kept yelling at literally anyone she came into contact with. And from that point, Hollyoaks kind of became my baby. Just because Hollyoaks is like the other shows on crack. It's kind of crazy. Like so much more happens, everything else is so much crazier. But like you still get these like brief rare moments of like genuine fantastic talent and like people showing that they are genuinely very talented. Like I obviously loved Sienna. I didn't really like Darren and Nancy at the time, but through time I've come to appreciate them a lot more. And you know, I don't even really know what drew me in. I like Juliet, I like Perry, I like Sid. And it felt right. It felt right. It was a nice little pace change in comparison to the other shows where a lot more happens, and like I said, there's a lot more to indulge in about the show. And from that time onwards, though, despite it being 2020 and not really much coming out and being caught up, I did start watching more of Coronation Street. I watched 2019. I watched 2019. I watched 2018. I watched 2000 and 2001. And I really went through a lot more of the back catalogue because it's really fun to, you know, find more stuff up about shows. I used to be a big proponent of you start liking it, you start reading the wikis and you start seeing what other characters did, you start absorbing more information. And I definitely did that. I got to watch a lot of the old stuff and at least get some more context, at least build up that understanding. And as I said, this generally pitted on. In 2020, I think, was it 2020 when Neighbours got cancelled? It may have been. I don't remember. Well, when it got cancelled the first time, I'd also watched Neighbours for about 6 months in there because I was a big fan of Chloe and Ellie, and I was a big fan of Chloe and Nicolette. And then, you know, got to see more of Harlow as she developed into a character. And I spent a good couple months watching Neighbours before it got axed the first time and then never really went back to it. And so just I felt that was a pretty interesting one to kind of go through my history. Now let's talk about times that it made you want to quit. Because ultimately, as said before, being a soap fan is almost quite similar to being a football fan or a wrestling fan. Like, if you watch at a certain time, you're going to have your certain ideas as to what you want your soap to be like. If you watch during all the crime stuff, you're probably going to want to watch like the Mitchell Empire. If you like the family stuff, you're probably going to like 85 and stuff that relates to big family drama that is really leading forward the stories. And, you know, so forth. It's just how it be, really. It's just, you tend to love where you got started. And it, you know, since I started in this 2018, I kind of did enjoy the slightly grittier era of EastEnders, but also a lot of the characters I liked, I recognized that they were not really that great characters, and in retrospect, it's ones I disliked the most, like 2018 Alfie Moon, which me and Piggy have talked to death about, like Hayley Slater, like I hated Stacey. Like a lot of the, like Gray Atkins, Whitney, and later Ben Mitchell, all these characters I'd grown sick of because they'd had such a high purchase, such a high position on this pedestal that I didn't really feel like they'd earned necessarily. I didn't really feel like they'd earned their stay. And yeah, it was sorry, I got distracted. And at this point during the 2019 and especially the 2020 period, this was a really kind of tried time for me as an EastEnders fan, because you had the continuation of Ben Mitchell, you had the forever tormented treatment of Whitney Dean, you had Gray Atkins slowly trundling along, and especially the pandemic time where it shut down, you did have the anniversary where Denny dies, and it was supposed to be really big and important and exciting, but ultimately it was really underwhelming because it was Denny who died, and it's like, yeah, great. You know, the only Denny I was sad who died was Denny Duquette in fucking Grey's Anatomy. You know what I'm saying? And then everything shut down, and then they had to come back, and then they had the really exciting week where they went, okay, Chantel is going to die. It's like, oh, yeah, all right, that's you know, tragic, but you know, important to tell, especially with the lockdowns and how many people were completely rattled and, you know, hurt, and a lot of victims. Excuse me. And yeah, a lot of victims really did struggled, and a lot of victims suffered during those times. So yeah, it was an interesting story to tell. But then, after the first week back when it returned, absolute terrible. Really damp, boring, bleak, beige, really mediocre EastEnders. And generally, this kind of continued in this trajectory where pretty much from that period of like 2020 and even 2019, I think 2020 to about 2022, fully to the end, was where I'd fully given up on EastEnders being my favourite soap. Because ultimately, it wasn't doing what I wanted it to. A lot of the things I'd come to love about it, I ultimately just became fed up with. A lot of the characters who I liked 3 years ago ultimately didn't really show much growth or change, so I ended up disliking them significantly more, a la Ben Mitchell, who was also formerly one of my favourite EastEnders characters of all time, but after his recent tired, trauma-ridden stint, I ultimately gave up on the character, because ultimately I just was tired of seeing a character who I'd initially wanted to invest in just be so chronically unhappy. And it's a sad time. And from that point onwards, pretty much till about 2023, where then I believe Chris Glenshaw kind of paved the way for the future of EastEnders and really brought it back. 2023 for me was the best year in soap the entire time, or the best year in EastEnders the entire time I've been watching it, and one that should fundamentally be absolutely recalled and remembered, because it was truly a great year. So much shock, so much surprises, so much good material, so many good returns, so many good character entrances, so many good things in that year. And from that one, it's pretty much continued till now, where it did kind of retake the throne of being my favorite soap. And it still is to this day. And, you know, with Ben Wadey set to take charge very soon, a part of, you know, the unpredictability. How will it look in a year's time? It's very hard to tell as of now, but I'm interested to see how it unfolds. So yeah, from that 2020 onwards period, it definitely stopped being my favorite show. And that's fine, because at that point, Coronation Street took over. Why? Not because of the current product, but simply because I was having so much fun finding out other stuff to watch. And I was watching previous years, and I was catching up on all of this extra drama. Because the best thing for me about soaps is if you actually have the excess time to do, if you actually find yourself having so much more time and you watch previous years, you get to have a break from what's going out currently, and you get to pick your own pace. Like, if you're watching, it's like my brother who got into EastEnders Christmas 2023, I think. Maybe in 2024. No, I think it was 2023. I don't remember now. It's been a hot minute anyways. And it became really intriguing. And he... Oh god, I'm forgetting what I was actually... I'm forgetting where I was going with it. Oh yeah, but obviously he wanted to watch some more, so I set him on to watching classic EastEnders like 1985. And we both had the same experience where you start watching it, it's like, oh, this is so addictive. Let's just get more and more. And it's so cool to build on knowledge you already have and build on the history, because sometimes the history can make the big moment so much more impactful and so much more exciting. And I didn't really watch older EastEnders that much because ultimately at this point in time, as I said, now I did start to watch older Coronation Street. And as I said, I got through a bunch of older stuff, got through a couple of years worth in there due to lovely archivists on YouTube that you can find, but full credit to them for, allowing such a easy find of these episodes, because it does genuinely make it makes it so much more accessible. And it's why I've always praised Hollyoaks for putting their episodes online. So I continued enjoying Coronation Street, but mostly because there was past stuff. And unfortunately, though, at this point in time, Coronation Street for me did start to turn. A lot of the storylines I'd watched and get hooked weren't really being shown anymore. And this is where it started to show some warning signs. But I wasn't necessarily fully out on Coronation Street until the Stephen Reed storyline started, which it's kind of become like a cult classic for some people. But for me, it was the nail in the coffin. At this point, I proceeded to get so uninterested in Coronation Street. But I still am a soap fan, and I do love to watch soap. So I only stopped watching in... I think it was the start of 2024. I believe. Let's remember when Stephen Reed was even on Coronation Street. He was gone in it was 2023. Okay, so I stopped watching January. I stopped watching December 2022 till about March or April 2023, where I had just decided I don't care about any of this. I am just simply not interested. The show's not good. All the humor's just pissing me off. It's time for it to be done. It's time for me to stop watching it because I'm just tired of this shit. And it became a big sticking point, and I was just so fed up. And I did stop watching it for a couple months in there, but I do still love Coronation Street, and I was really demotivated. And I started rewatching in about April. I got through the couple of months I'd skipped. And, at this point in time, is Coronation Street the best it's ever been? Absolutely not. But I still think that Kate Brooks is really starting to do a better job of rebuilding the show in some pretty torrid circumstances. I've been pretty open about this. I made a lot of videos discussing kind of the downfall of Coronation Street, but I do believe it is actually getting better. So, and at this point in time where I was less intrigued in Coronation Street, Hollyoaks did kind of become the de facto first place, simply because Hollyoaks is such an addictive show in a way, because so much stuff happens, and also they did the generous thing of allowing previous episodes on their streaming service. So I rewatched Hollyoaks 2015, which I absolutely adored. A great mix of families, and the fun bit about rewatching old Hollyoaks is, yeah, sure, some of the characters will stay the same, but also seeing where they are placed is absolutely fantastic, because it can go so many different ways. Oh, who's Steward now? Brendan. Oh, let's go. Oh, who's Steward now? John Paul. Oh, who's Steward now? Doug. Christ, love it. So it really is fun to kind of watch previous stuff. And so I'd watched 2015 Hollyoaks. It was a great blessing when I was still a leather worker and still struggling completely. And honestly, so far at this point in time, I've never actually stopped watching Coronation. No. I've never stopped watching Hollyoaks. Hollyoaks I do absolutely love. And even though it's also come under fire due to Channel 4's reluctance to actually believe in the project, I do genuinely adore Hollyoaks with all of my heart. And it would take a lot for me to stop watching. But also because of where it's at with Channel 4, I'm also terrified that at some point they're just going to axe it. So I basically treat each episode of Coronation... fuck me. I treat each episode of Hollyoaks like it's going to be my last, because I know that one day Channel 4 is probably just going to decide, you know what, we hate our channel, we can't afford it anymore, Hollyoaks is dead. And it'll be a really sad time. And so, like, I'm trying to never be that doomsayer about Hollyoaks, because if I'm saying that it's in the bin, you know, what are people who are half watching saying? So for me, Hollyoaks never really became less fun. It definitely became a bit shrouded in mystery around the time before the time jump, and now post time jump, because it's put in a really weird spot. Because Hollyoaks is now in a position where it only has 1 hour of programming a week, where previously it had, what, 2 or 1.5? I don't remember. And so stuff would happen a lot more frequently, but now they've kind of changed the approach to accommodate slightly less episodes, which means it's kind of lost the rabid pace that Hollyoaks formerly had, where, you know, oh, here's a storyline that probably should go on for a year, well, it's on for 6 months. So it's kind of a crazy, like, time to be a soap fan, because you have all these projects who are still trying to survive, and then you have EastEnders, which is like, hey, Captain, is everything all going all right? Yeah, I'm basically flying this by myself. Sick. So it's been a weird time. As for Emmerdale, I watched the Mina stuff. I enjoyed Mina Jutler as a character. I know some people hate her because she was campy and ridiculous, but I also think she was just an iconic queen. Serving, you know what? Absolutely serving. See you. And I also watched stuff when, like, Naomi Walters and Ethan Anderson and, like, Charles. I really enjoyed those, like, pairings, and I thought that was a really interesting family. But also, I couldn't get, like, they left. they got axed essentially. So, like, fundamentally, I kind of went, well, I guess I'm not watching this then. And I do like Emmerdale, and I like the concept of Emmerdale, and I've talked about it recently as well, where people have kept on saying, like, you should watch Emmerdale, you should watch Emmerdale. My problem with watching Emmerdale is I'm already watching so much other soap stuff in the week that I don't want to, like, muddy it by trying to engage with another show. Well, I do think it'll be funny to kind of do a weekly, like, not a weekly roundup as such, but just, like, you know, here is the war. What won this week and such. And I think that'll be a really fun concept of an idea to do on the channel, but it also means I have to get into watching Emmerdale. But I think Emmerdale, fundamentally, a lot of people are believing that it is in a really good place right now, and it probably is competing with EastEnders for Soap of the Year so far. So just to reiterate though, when did soap stop being fun? EastEnders in that from 2018 to 2023 for me. The start of 2023, like the end of 2022, the start of 2023. That was truly a really enjoyable time to be a soap fan and be an EastEnders fan for me. But that's still in between stage as well. That also absolutely ruined everything for me, and I did very quickly fall out of love for the show, fundamentally. And then for Coronation Street, it was the end of 2022, the start of 2023, where I stopped watching for a couple of months because I had quit, because I was just so sick of the show and so sick of what they were producing. And for Hollyoaks, like I said, I treat it as my baby, so I refuse to ever stop loving it, because I do. And like, that's where this all comes from, right? I do love soaps. I am a soap fan at the core. You know, if I did stop watching soaps, a lot of my identity would be gone, because it's such an engaging medium, and there's so much of it that even when you're not watching it, you can still think about it, and you can still watch previous of it. There's so much out there that it's just so delicious and so delectable that you just can't help yourself from having it. And that's where all of this comes from, right? This is a true belief that soaps should be talked about and discussed, and genuinely I believed and absolutely adore them as a whole. And I'd love to hear what other people's like kind of soap journeys are, and generally the final point of just when did you quit watching soaps? Ironic that you'd be watching a person talk about soaps but not actually watching the shows. But people fall out of love, or they fall out of time, or they fall out of patience. When did you quit watching soaps? Tell me in the comment section down below. But all in all, I've been Ash from Watching Walford. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little video. Honestly, it was actually quite fun, even if it was a much more ramblier one. Genuinely, thank you for watching. Join us in the next one. See you then. Bye-bye. Bye.